We're only 18 months away from singularity. AI will no longer need us to give it instructions because AI will intervene at every point, that it will be ordering our food. It will be notifying the store or wherever that we've run out, we're getting low on something. Have little robots in the kitchen doing all of the menial stuff on our behalf, the chopping, the peeling, the mixing, all of that. The way that life is going to change in the next 3 to 5 years is almost unfathomable.
Welcome to the Let's Chew podcast presented by Gulfood, the largest annual F&B sourcing event in the world. I'm your host, Juwaria Hirsi, bringing you compelling stories and insights to a wide range of topics in the food and drinks industry, from farming, behind the scenes, to the culinary world, and to foods we simply love to chew on. In this podcast series, we speak to people, brands, and businesses across the food and drink spectrum to find out more about why they do what they do and how, in their own way, they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. Trust me, there's so much more, so listen to the Let's Chew podcast on our website, gulfood.com, and subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates in food. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Let's Chew podcast. As always, I'm your host, Juwaria Hirsi. Today's guest is Dr. Morgaine Gaye, a food futurologist known for her ability to decode the social, emotional, and sensory forces behind what and how we eat. From macro trends to micro snacks, we are diving into what the future holds for the F&B industry. Stay tuned. Dr. Morgaine, thank you so much for joining me on the Let's Chew podcast. I hope you're doing great.
Yeah, such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's just start with the basics. For those who might be unfamiliar, how do you explain what Futurologist does?
That's usually the hardest question of all because it is a bit multifaceted. So I suppose it is what it says on the tin. I look at the future of food. But to do that, I have to look at everything else because I always say food doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I look at geopolitics, economics, biobehavior, mouthfeel perception, the cultural zeitgeist, what people are going to want, but more importantly, why they're going to want it. And so for my job, I do lots of different roles. I do some media. I do lots of trend briefings. So that might be like a 1 hour specific focus trend briefing for whatever organization. Not always food brands, can be tech, can be hospitality, and a million things in between. Banking, I mean, all sorts. And and then I also do lots of consultation to help products get developed. So I work across category.
Beautiful. And would you say your work is more about predicting trends or like decoding the deeper insights behind them?
Ooh, both.
Okay.
Has to be both. It has to be both because I think people sometimes misunderstand the difference between a trend and a fad, because typically food brands, especially big food brands, take 3 to 4 years to get an idea to market. And so that's such a period of time that fads come and go super quick. So jumping on the bandwagon of something is usually a bad idea for large brands. So what I'm looking for and what I'm looking at and trying to predict are these massive cultural moments. So for example, I predicted Brexit or COVID, things like that, big things which are going to change the big cultural output, and that will feed into absolutely everything.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a moment and let's look at the bigger picture. The way food is grown, traded, and experienced is evolving sometimes drastically. So what big shifts are you seeing right now in how food is produced, consumed, and valued globally?
It's a humongous question. I mean, we'll be here all day, even just answering one of those 3 strands.
Yes.
You know, the things that are happening in production, it's so tricky. It's a lot about, as you know, wherever there's a war, then there's an issue with certain crops, transportation, the pipeline to get things to and from. It's often, we always think there isn't enough food in the world. There's plenty of food in the world. It's about shipping and it's about keeping food fresh for distribution. So that's some of the stuff that's being wrangled with. We're seeing more food grown, perhaps hydroponically or aquaponically. We're seeing more food grown in cities, a lot more food markets springing up. Go to the other two things that you were talking about.
It's
You
consumed.
asked three. Consumed. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just such massive questions. One of the things that we've seen even just since COVID is the way that people are eating has changed in terms of timings. In the last 20 years, we've gone in 20 years from 3 meals a day to double breakfast, like a second breakfast, and then a later lunch, and then an afternoon snack, and then a dinner. And now we're at a stage where we are doing more grazing, lots more mini meals, people eating very differently. People are thinking about shopping very differently. It used to be one big shop, and now it's much more frequent and perhaps more deliveries, people cooking from cooking boxes more often. I mean, there's just every single one of those is a topic in itself. Really difficult with the big questions because there's so much nuance in food, so much.
Right. And we will get into more details on the consumer behavior a little bit later. I want to understand with the perfect storm right now with geopolitical trade driven sourcing, are we seeing this new kind of localism or food nationalism emerge, whether it's about shorter supply chains or tariff driven sourcing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were going to see this more and more, not actually just because of the geopolitics, but also because of climate change and lots of eco-driven ideas. So yes, the geopolitical situation means that the trading is getting more tricky and a lot more expensive. And also there's a lot less trust, I think, a lot less trust for other countries, but also for our own governments and even for our own big corporations. I think we're trusting just less and less. So we're looking to people we know, we're looking to make that more local. And I think we're seeing much more local and regional production of food outlets, farmers, producers popping up. I think the other thing that's also really key is that people are now wanting things that are perhaps have less air miles or a better eco footprint. And as we see the global warming, and I just talked about how warm it is right now in the spring, it's the hottest spring, I think, on record right now in the UK. And we're going to see that continue in terms of these global shifts in climate, so that the UK will start to grow foods that we've never been able to grow before. That will happen throughout the world, and also won't be able to grow foods we've always grown. That will also happen throughout the world. So then we'll start to think about what foods grow locally that we've neglected over time. And there are lots of wild foods that we are currently not sourcing. We, as in the world, are not sourcing. So we'll see more rise in that as well.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the consumers and the consumer behavior, especially when we look at the next 5 years and the rest of 2025. You've mentioned post-COVID, the behavior and how we eat have changed. How has the role of food changed in people's lives in the last 5 years? And are we eating more for emotion, for function, or for both?
Food has really shifted in that people are thinking much, much more about health and also functional food. So you mentioned that lots of nootropics or food with a second benefit. So it's no good now that it just tastes good. It's what does it do for me? What's in it? Where's it come from? Who's produced it? Is it fair? Is it organic? What's gone into this? And also, how do I feel after I've consumed it? And people are getting much more nuanced about what they need in that moment. I think also in the last 5 years, people have realized the function and the role of food as a community. We lost that. And now that's come back during COVID, is eating together, sharing food together, becoming much more important because we've started to value humanity a little bit more, I think, since COVID, or just human exchanges face to face, some kind of skin time. We really were sort of skin hungry for a few years. So that's for sure, we are thinking about food in a different way. But I also think one of the things that is going to shift, because I think this goes to your other question, it's going to shift how we eat as we go forward, and it's already started, is Ozempic and GLP-1. So all of the weight loss drugs, the injectables, are changing the way people eat because they're not as hungry. Their cravings are different, if anything. And so then it does go to your question is it emotional? And food's always been emotional. I mean, food has been a very emotional thing because it connects that limbic part of the brain like smell does. It's flavor, it's memory. So we eat something and it reminds us of our mother's cooking, or it might remind us of a time. And we always have associations, all of us have associations with certain foods meaning certain things. So, oh, I always have that on my birthday, or at an Eid, or at Christmas, or whatever. So there are specifics. And so I think it's always been emotional and it's always had that memory attached. But one of the things that we will see because of GLP-1 and because of the way that people are only having these small little micro meals is that people have cravings not to be satiated because they're already full, but something about the mouth. And I think that plays into texture and where we're going to see texture going. And I think that's been it's been the hit of the Dubai chocolate, the pistachio Dubai chocolate, which is, as you know, viral and already annoying. So just go, oh my goodness.
It's a deodorant version now.
Oh, is there? My goodness. But one of the things that's made it so really, what made that grass, what was that hit the culture? What was that made it such a cool thing? It's texture. Because the texture was unique and it was different, and it's the multiple textures, it's that multiple mouthfeel. They call it in texture terms, they call it meddlers. Meddlers like multiple textures in one bite, crunchy, creamy, chewy, all of those things in one bite. And so it ticks lots of boxes, a bit like the Ferrero Rocher does that as well. And so there's something about texture in terms of craving and also emotion and comfort, where we really start to see something playing out, because creamy is very comforting. So we're thinking about emotions with food. They've always been there, but sometimes it's just been food sort of fills the emotion. But now texture is going to take that place even more, just because GLP-1 has curbed the hunger.
And if GLP-1 is curbing the hunger and people are going towards more functional and then like sensorial feel of food, do you think when everything is functional, do you think consumers will ever push back and go back to seeking food that's simply for pleasure?
Well, this is the weird thing about trends. It's exactly like a coin. So whatever you have on one side, you absolutely have on the flip. So it's the balance almost. You have to have two things at play. So as we see the rise of culture of functional food for health, a lot more focus on health, not just in food, but in absolutely every single thing. Every brand will be selling health. On the flip side of that, it's pure indulgence. It's more is more. It's the real sort of it's over the top. It's decadence. It's absolute decadence. And so we see those two things play out at the same time. In fact, you're already seeing it. The Dubai chocolate's a great example of that. The giant bars of Dubai chocolate, or you've probably seen virally the tiramisu in the back of a truck, a whole bar filled with tiramisu, or things like that. That's the flip side. There's nothing about that says health.
True. I want to talk about you've already mentioned the confectionery and the snacking world, two categories that have quietly become about emotional, experiential, and tech enabled. So in your opinion, what macro lifestyle shifts are reshaping the way we snack, especially in the category like confectionery?
Well, I think that's the GLP-1 really. I mean, one of the things, the biggest challenge right now for a lot of the large confectionery companies who I consult to, they are really, they've been really sidelined by the GLP-1. Really, it's an epidemic in a way, that so many people so quickly have access to that. And so all of those impulse buys, that snacking has really shifted because that craving is less. If you remember, it was originally a drug for diabetics. So it's about that sugar craving, and it takes that down a notch. So that's really at play. We are actually wanting less sugar than we have before. And that's not just because of GLP-1. That's actually happened over the last 15 years. And lots of brands, for example, Heinz ketchup, or have all reduced their sugar over time. Lots of the soft drinks have reduced their sugar over time. I mean, you may or may not know this, but I believe that the Coca-Cola or the Pepsi, one of the two in the Middle East, has the most sugar than any recipe globally.
Oh, I did not know that.
So yeah, so different cultures have a higher sugar tolerance, and the Middle East has had a higher sugar tolerance, and therefore bigger epidemic of sugar diabetes. Yeah, so it's a big thing, big sweet tooth. But actually, globally, brands have reduced their sugar, and we are craving less and less sugar. And what we're going towards, we're developing a much more sophisticated bitter profile, bitter taste profile, and we're going that way a little bit. Umami, bitter.
And let's talk about the AI that's taking over the world. How do you think AI comes into the consumer behavior and the kind of products people will be craving, the types of flavors, or how can businesses, both businesses and consumers, look towards how AI is going to impact their life in terms of food?
It's going to impact their life in terms of absolutely everything. I mean, we're only 18 months away from singularity, so we as human beings will be redundant in 18 months. AI will no longer need us to give it instructions, to program it, to give it any kind of direction. It's already been able to think for itself, so it's just a matter of time before it can do absolutely everything. So that's going to be a huge shift. I think by which point we'll all have agents, operatives operating on our behalf and eventually intervening on our behalf. So it's going to get much more difficult for us to have an original thought, to make an original decision, because AI will intervene at every point. So booking a holiday or having a meeting with a friend, AI will be intervening, rearranging everything. So that in the food space will mean that it will be ordering our food. It will be notifying the store or wherever that we've run out, we're getting low on something. It will be an incredible recipe source, which it already is, but it will also be the functionality that was not that far that we can have little robots in the kitchen doing all of the menial stuff on our behalf, the chopping, the peeling, the mixing, all of that. I mean, the way that life is going to change in the next 3 to 5 years is almost unfathomable. I mean, the jobs that will exist in 2030, I think 60-something% don't even exist right now. So it's a whole different world. And it will affect everything. We will also have much more access by then to understanding our own microbiome, our own DNA, exactly what our body needs in that moment, in that day, in terms of nutritional values, by which we can absorb, not just that, oh, you need some more vitamin D. You know, we won't need to be having blood tests on a daily basis. That will be known. We'll probably use our breath. We'll be able to scan a device around any kind of, whether it's the kitchen or some kind of supermarket or shop, it will be able to identify the foods which will give us what we need. Basically, it will be in every element of our lives.
Yeah, it's exciting and scary at the same time to have that much information thrown into you and to know so much about yourself. So what big advice or big prediction would you give to a brand or a private label brand in the snacking and confectionery world, especially those in the Middle East, to look forward to or to just get ahead in terms of what they should provide to their consumers?
I think the biggest thing, well, there's two things actually. One of the biggest things that we're going to be thinking about as we go into the future is about what does it mean to be human? So if it was my brand and I had a small brand, I would be very clear on thinking about how I can bring community together, community spaces, community hubs, something that does good, not just for the body, but for the planet and for each other. I think the other thing is made by humans, hashtag made by humans. We're going to get to a state really quickly now, so quick, where everything is somehow made not by humans, and it being made by humans will give it the added value. So they would be the two focus. I would focus on human beingness.
And of course, behind these trends and are platforms that help bring things to life. And that's where we met Gulfood a few years ago through connection, trade, and conversation. So in a digital first world, how important are these physical trade shows like Gulfood and the upcoming ISM Middle East? It's all about confectionery for shaping trends and building real partnerships. And like you said, the human touch to all.
Oh, it's going to become more and more valuable, ultimately people by people. And it is unfortunately going to be human versus AI. It's going to be two very distinct realms of reality. Yes, it will be blurred because we're already in that third space. I mean, look, we're doing this now in two different countries, but ultimately we're still people and we have met in person, and that's a really lovely thing. And I think that we're going to value that. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think there'll probably be more and more of those events, more and more opportunities to connect, partly also because there's going to be a lot of people with much more free time. And so what are people going to do with that free time? And it's about coming together and having conversations and building opportunities. One of the things that we lost in COVID and also working at home is we lost the magic moments, the friction moments, the water cooler moments, those conversations that spark ideas. We've stopped having incidental moments of conversation because when we're working from home, we're doing the job, but we're not creating anything new. And one of the dangers for companies and for us as people is that we are now becoming so data-driven that we're losing a lot of originality and a lot of risk-taking. And the risk-taking really is what generates that newness. Because if we're all data-driven, we're all following the same information. That information is always old because data is always something that's been collated in the past. So we're missing those moments where we can just have a chat and go, oh, God, that reminds me of whatever, and then generate ideas from that, which to your point of what's going to happen with these like Gulfood and things like that, more of that, more reasons to come together.
Beautiful. So now I want to kind of get to know you. I know it's kind of mixed up. People usually ask the person, who are you in the beginning of the episode, but I like to kind of put it towards the end to kind of tie everything together. Like I said, human touch, the person behind the Futurologist. So tell me why you do what you do and how you got started. And did you just wake up one day and said you want to be a Futurologist? Just tell me about that journey.
It's been a very windy journey. It's not, I think there's some people at school that say, I want to be a doctor, and they are one. And that wasn't me. So it's been really twisty turny. One of the things that I do remember always saying when I was growing up is that I never wanted to work in food. So I always think that when you say something enough, even with the word don't in front of it, you're still actually generating that as a future possibility. This was never my intention at all. And it happened just completely by chance. When I look back now, I can see the connectors, but at the time it didn't seem to be clear at all. But that's hindsight, 2020. So I suppose, I mean, I've always been around food. My mum was a butcher. My dad was a bodybuilder and a powerlifter and had very unusual specific diets and for gaining weight or cutting or losing weight. So I suppose I've been around food preferences in different ways and had grandparents who grew all their own food and raised their own meat and made absolutely everything from scratch, absolutely everything. So sort of different strands of reality. And then as I suppose I did a PhD, and in my PhD, I bizarrely, even it was nothing to do with food, I was looking at the way things connect, and that's what I'm still doing really. But I had some food and some recipes in there as a way of describing culture. And without me knowing it even at that time, I was always interested in food as a cultural, a little bit sort of, I suppose, anthropologically looking at food and cultures. And ceremonies, things like, in the Middle East, as you know, you have the coffee pot, which is a real emblem of the culture. And then you have the dates and the coffee pot. And it really, you would get a feeling of the culture just through that alone. And then you think about breaking fasts and Ramadan. And we realize that actually most religions are structured around meals and food. Most cultures, in fact, all cultures have ways of eating, specifics of they don't eat some things and they do eat other things. And every single culture has that. Even if it's not religious, there are things that some cultures would eat and other people come and go, you eat what? It's a bit like frog's legs in France, or, horse meat in France. Other cultures, that's disgusting. For them, it's completely normal. So I've always been interested in that. And then my friend was doing a program with the BBC many, many years ago. And the program was called Business 2025. Here we are.
Wow.
And yes, it was many decades ago. And they had a number of futurologists on a panel. And one of them dropped out. And she said, I think you can do it. Will you step in? You have to predict the future of 6 different things. I can't remember them all. And one of them was electric cars. And I was the only person out of the panel that said, yes, everyone will be driving electric cars. Electric cars are the future. And here we are.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I suppose, the threads of things started to weave together. And then I started to understand a lot about food, the food industry, supply chain, food marketing, and the truth, and the difference between those two things. And I went down the health route, and I learned a lot about nutrition and the body. And then I think all of those strands just came together over time. So I've been doing this a few decades now.
That's beautiful. The fact that you didn't want to do anything to do with food, and here you are predicting the future of food. It's amazing, really.
It's cruel.
I think it's a blessing. So one last question. I just want you to just rapid fire 2 or 3 things you think the future of food will hold. Any trend, any behavior. It doesn't have to be food is specific, can be behaviors, can be, I don't know, businesses, industry, government. Where do you see the future of food going?
Okay, I think we're going to eventually we're going to be taxed on our rubbish. So I think that we're going to be looking at packaging is going to be a massive thing in food. Food packaging, if any company is not thinking about what their packaging is made of now, they should be, because it's going to take time for them to be able to afford and innovate and get some kind of packaging which meets requirements which are not yet set. Because I think there's going to be big legislation around waste. I think that we are going to start getting either taxed or shamed on our personal waste. Imagine if there was a camera in the top of your garbage bin, and and every time you put something in, it filmed it, and then you had your own little, a bit like Instagram or whatever, and it showed you how much waste you use. And then at the end, you get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, you get judged on that, and then there's some kind of penalty. So that I see that as some kind of dystopian rubbish waste future, because I think that we're at a critical point for waste. I think the second thing for industry is that they're going to be very keen on looking at second revenue stream income. So their own food waste, for example, if you have a coffee shop and you have coffee grounds, what do you do with them, and how do you develop second revenue stream for that, whether that's biofuel or do you use it to make lampshades, or what do you use it for? So I think there's a second revenue stream in all businesses, and I think there's money there, but also an incentive environmentally. I just don't think we can ignore the environmental question and conundrum that we're in right now. So I think those two are huge. As I said, I think another thing would be in terms of climate change and new crops or old crops coming back, or things like teff, which isn't new but grows in certain places really well, being incorporated into more and more foods and becoming normalized. So I think the normalization of old crops or hardy crops in relation to climate. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a massive climate immigration or mass migration in terms of climate, because I do think that some places, some countries, some cities will start to experience extreme flooding. I think we're going to see some massive flooding. flooding. I know people think fires are the bigger thing. We, of course, massive drought, but massive flooding. So I think, and then also just the unlivability in major cities in terms of not clean water supply, and then we'll see mass migration. So I think we're in a real critical time for humanity. And there's going to be a lot of changes because of that. As a company, now would be a good time because I understand with business, it's always about the bottom line and about the profit. And you want to do good, but there is always, you still have to make a profit. So it's always difficult to think about the things which aren't necessary in the moment. But I would urge brands to do that, to think about that, because when it comes, there won't be a lot of time. And now would be the time to innovate while there is a little bit of a buffer. But yeah, I think there's so much. I think also one of the big commodities of our future will be water. What's in our water supply? How do we package our water? Because we can't keep making plastic bottles. How do we do that? Edible bottles and all sorts of different things that we can start to innovate around. But the quality of our water is going to become a big conversation.
Beautiful. It's really exciting. So thank you so much, Morgaine, for joining me on the Let's Chew podcast and for such a fascinating look at where food and the world around it is heading. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Let's Chew podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow us for more conversation on the future of food. Until next time, bye for now.